They built a chamber designed to crush civilizations. Gravity thickened. Air turned toxic. Every species that had ever stood in that circle had fallen to their knees within seconds. They expected 3 more to break. Instead, the humans stayed standing. And in that moment, the most powerful government in the galaxy realized something horrifying. It was not testing humanity. It was exposing itself. Light flooded downward from tiers of alien bodies layered across the interior of the vast sphere, illumination engineered to fall hardest on the lowest platform. 3 human figures stood within that exposed circle, while thousands of non-human forms loomed above, suspended in water columns, anchored to crystalline lattices, coiled upon metallic ridges. Gravity had been subtly adjusted, pressure pushed downward just enough to remind flesh of its relative insignificance. Air vibrated with harmonic emissions, a greeting ritual refined across millennia. The sound was not meant to welcome. It was calibrated to compress the nervous systems of petitioning species, to induce lowered posture, softened gaze, submissive alignment. Records showed every civilization bent within moments. The humans did not. They remained upright, shoulders squared, eyes level despite the architectural insistence that they look up in awe. Muscles tightened under unfamiliar atmospheric density, lungs adapting to trace chemical irritants embedded in the ceremonial air. Heart rate spiked, then stabilized. Sensors across the chamber registered compliance thresholds unmet. A ripple moved through the tiers. At the highest elevation, the presiding authority extended a limb adorned with signaling filaments. The gesture triggered the ancient recognition descent, a protocol requiring entrants to kneel until granted conditional voice. Energy fields thickened around the central platform, pressing down with invisible weight. Several minor species watching from peripheral sectors experienced sympathetic reflex and lowered themselves instinctively. The humans remained standing. Knees trembled. One of them inhaled slowly, nostrils flaring against the engineered atmosphere. Another clasped hands behind the back in deliberate stillness. The third tilted the head slightly, not in defiance, not in challenge, but in refusal to perform ritual diminishment. Biometric arrays calculated stress fractures along bone microstructures as gravity intensified another fraction. Still they did not kneel. Murmurs fractured the chamber's acoustic equilibrium. Archive comparisons began running in real time. No recorded entrant had resisted recognition descent beyond a handful of seconds. The energy field pulsed again, stronger, pressing skin toward floor. One human shifted stance, widening footing to distribute load. Tendons strained. Sweat formed, evaporated instantly under environmental controls. Their silhouettes did not collapse. The presiding authority hesitated. That hesitation transmitted faster than any spoken decree. Across subordinate delegations, encrypted doctrinal channels activated. Queries emerged, small, cautious, dangerous. If ritual fails to compel, is ritual legitimate? If posture is not granted, can authority still claim it? The recognition descent protocol terminated without formal completion for the first time in recorded governance history. Energy pressure eased, not by proclamation, but by necessity. The humans stood unchanged within the circle of light. High above, layered ranks shifted in uneasy recalculation. In distant sectors of the chamber network, minor species representatives began transmitting private analyses to their home systems. Not praise, not rebellion. A question. If they can remain standing, why do we kneel? The chamber lights dimmed fractionally as environmental systems recalibrated around an anomaly that refused compression. The ceremony had not concluded. It had fractured. Signal arrays ignited across the inner shell of the sphere, projecting the evaluation chamber into every registered member system. Translation matrices synchronized, archival recorders activated. What had once been a contained assessment became compulsory spectacle. The central platform elevated slightly, no longer at the lowest gravitational well, but still beneath every watching tier. Light narrowed, concentrating on the 3 figures whose refusal had already disrupted ceremonial precedent. The presiding authority spoke without raising volume. Amplification systems ensured omnipresence. The evaluation would test worthiness for inclusion. Metrics appeared as hovering glyphs: stability index, compliance probability, structural predictability. Each parameter derived from centuries of precedent. Admission required measurable alignment with established hierarchy. One human stepped forward. Atmospheric density shifted subtly as surveillance fields tightened. The figure did not request permission to speak. Vocalization began before acknowledgement protocol completed. On what basis does the hierarchy define worth? Translation systems hesitated, recalibrated, transmitted the words outward. Across the chamber, sensory organs flickered. The question had not been submitted through formal channels. It bypassed procedural sequence entirely. The presiding authority responded with rehearsed cadence. Order ensures survival. Central governance prevents systemic collapse. Admission preserves equilibrium. The human did not lower gaze. Equilibrium for whom? Data streams pulsed brighter. Minor species delegations accessed archived charter documents, searching for clauses rarely examined. The broadcast carried everything unfiltered. Billions of observers across distant systems watched the exchange unfold without mediation. The second human stepped forward, activating a projection array without waiting for clearance. Historical conflict records appeared midair, centuries of enforced tribute adjustments, unilateral border revisions, trial outcomes resulting in territorial absorption. Each example documented within the Council's own archives. Your structure claims protection, the voice continued, yet outcomes demonstrate concentration of authority and resource flow toward a single governing core. Define protection. Acoustic levels within the sphere rose despite imposed silence protocols. Peripheral delegations transmitted internal alerts. Doctrinal stability matrices began flashing variance indicators. The presiding authority initiated a compliance demand. Evaluation requires deference. Petitioners must not interrogate arbiters. The third human moved. Petition implies request for privilege. We request nothing. That sentence detonated more violently than any weapon discharge could have. Broadcast relays magnified the declaration across sectors accustomed to structured supplication. Peripheral species whose cultures had long equated survival with appeasement experienced measurable neural agitation spikes. If not petitioners, then what are you? Observers leaned forward in fluid columns, exoskeletal harnesses tightening. Participants. The word hung in shared airspace like an atmospheric breach. Participants implied mutual agency. Participants implied authority distributed rather than bestowed. The presiding authority invoked procedural violation statutes. Energy fields flickered at the edges of the platform, threat without explicit command. Security units along upper tiers shifted weight. The first human continued before suppression command could finalize. If legitimacy requires unquestioned posture, then legitimacy is fragile. If authority cannot endure examination, then authority is dependency disguised as order. Translation matrices strained under conceptual load. Several subordinate systems briefly dropped synchronization as internal censorship algorithms attempted to flag the rhetoric. Universal Witness Protocol prevented filtration. Across dozens of peripheral systems, archived founding doctrines resurfaced. Phrases about collective stewardship, rotational leadership, provisional mandate, language once central, now ceremonial. Comparative analyses spread faster than containment efforts. Within the chamber, a crystalline delegation initiated a live query to the central database. Has hierarchy ever been subject to vote? The answer returned automatically. No. That single output reverberated through the acoustic shell. The presiding authority's signaling filaments dimmed momentarily, an involuntary response registered by biometric scanners. The evaluation metrics hovering above the humans flickered, compliance probability recalculating downward, while unpredictability spiked beyond modeled thresholds. Security fields intensified around the platform, but did not activate fully. Activation under universal broadcast would confirm fear. The second human spoke again, voice steady despite pressure shifts. If inclusion requires silence, exclusion is irrelevant. You are not evaluating us. You are revealing yourselves. Peripheral tiers erupted into encrypted transmission cascades. Several junior species representatives initiated formal doctrinal audits mid-session, citing procedural irregularity in authority questioning clause absence. For the first time in recorded governance history, the presiding authority did not immediately silence dissent. Hesitation stretched. Across the galaxy, countless observers leaned closer to their displays. The spectacle had inverted. The ones summoned for judgment had turned inquiry outward. Evaluation had not concluded. It had metastasized. Within central processing cores, stability forecasts adjusted sharply downward. Probability models now accounted for ideological spread, contagion vector categorized as mimetic destabilization. The humans remained motionless within narrowing light. Above them, the chamber's certainty fractured audibly. Alarms did not sound. That was the first sign of containment. Instead, the chamber lights softened, acoustic harmonics lowered, and a calm directive rippled through translation channels. Temporary recess for procedural recalibration. The presiding authority withdrew behind layered energy veils while administrative drones sealed secondary access corridors. Broadcast continued, but framing shifted. Glyphs appeared along the edges of every projection, contextual guidance, clarifying annotations, subtle linguistic weighting designed to reassert interpretive dominance. The humans remained on the central platform, unescorted, unacknowledged. Gravity increased by a fractional measure. Across the galaxy, commentary feeds surged. Central media nodes began distributing synchronized summaries, evaluative misunderstanding, cultural misalignment, youthful rhetorical deviation. The language was soft, patient, paternal. It attempted to transform confrontation into naivety. Within the chamber, upper-tier delegates accessed priority channels. Data flowed in tight, encrypted bursts. Risk projections spiked. Peripheral sectors showed abnormal transmission density, minor species communicating laterally rather than vertically for the first time in recorded governance history. Containment required reframing. The presiding authority re-emerged, illumination narrowing around the throne. Voice modulation softened, timbre adjusted toward reassurance. Hierarchy is not dominance. It is optimization. Centralization prevents redundancy. Historical consolidation ensured peace after eras of fragmentation. Holographic archives blossomed above the chamber floor. Ancient conflicts between early interstellar civilizations, chaotic border wars, resource collapses. Images of devastation scrolled in measured cadence. The message was clear. Without the Council's consolidation, extinction would have followed. The first human watched without visible reaction. Peace imposed is not peace sustained. Translation engines paused, recalculated, transmitted. The second human activated a secondary projection without authorization. This time the imagery did not depict war. It displayed trade flows, tribute transfers, technological licensing restrictions. Animated vectors traced movement of resources from peripheral systems toward the central administrative core. Over centuries, the pattern intensified. Optimization appears directional. Murmurs spread in layered frequencies. Several delegations ran independent verification algorithms against publicly available data streams. Results mirrored the projection. The presiding authority countered immediately. Central accumulation funds collective defense infrastructure. Peripheral contributions ensure shared security. The third human moved closer to the projection array, hands hovering within light. Then why are peripheral defense fleets commanded exclusively from central command tiers? Silence thickened. Security units along the chamber walls shifted stance. Energy filaments pulsed along their armor seams, not yet activated, but ready. Across subordinate systems, archived governance charters resurfaced. Early clauses referencing rotational command oversight had long been archived under ceremonial classification. Now they were being parsed in real time by billions. One crystalline delegation transmitted an inquiry through open channel. When was rotational oversight suspended? Administrative delay flickered. No suspension record found. The chamber's atmospheric processors hummed louder, compensating for rising metabolic output across thousands of species. The first human stepped forward again, voice steady. Structures change. That is natural. But absence of record indicates removal without consensus. Peripheral delegations began cross-referencing internal archives. Fragmented documentation surfaced, old debates, emergency measures enacted during crisis eras, provisional centralization extended indefinitely. Containment shifted strategy. Security fields activated around the central platform, not to restrain physically, but to isolate acoustically. The humans' voices dimmed for those physically present, though broadcast systems still transmitted cleanly to external systems under universal witness mandate. The presiding authority addressed the chamber directly. Procedural stability requires trust. Public destabilization during evaluation constitutes aggression against collective continuity. The word aggression ignited across translation feeds. Labeling dissent as hostility carried implications, sanction pathways, cleansing statutes, suspension votes. The second human responded without hesitation. Transparency is not aggression. External broadcast metrics spiked sharply. Peripheral systems recorded and replayed the exchange across local networks, analyzing tone, posture, biometric stress indicators. The human's physiological data remained elevated but controlled. No signs of panic. No signs of retreat. The third human expanded the projection again. A layered model of hyperlane infrastructure filled the air, relay nodes, traffic control nexuses, authorization hubs. Overlays revealed ownership coding embedded deep within the routing architecture. Central command identifiers repeated across nodes controlling majority transit corridors. Navigation freedom appears conditional. A ripple of energy passed through the chamber tiers. Several species reliant on hyperlane transit for trade began cross-checking routing permissions in real time. Hidden throttling parameters surfaced, bandwidth restrictions adjustable from central cores. The presiding authority's signaling filaments flared brighter, heat signatures rising. Those safeguards prevent weaponized mobility. The first human tilted the head slightly. Or prevent independent mobility. Security units stepped closer to the platform perimeter. Energy intensity climbed another increment, pressing against human musculature. Tendons flexed under the load. None of them lowered posture. Across peripheral systems, minor species councils initiated emergency sessions. Queries spread faster than suppression could counter. If transit is conditional, sovereignty is partial. Within the chamber, a delegation composed of aquatic forms disengaged from passive suspension and rose above their designated fluid column, breaching customary posture boundaries. Bioluminescent patterns across their membranes pulsed in agitation. Request clarification. Who authorizes relay throttling? Administrative drones attempted to reroute the question into closed channel. Universal witness protocol prevented suppression. The presiding authority answered with minimal delay. Central oversight ensures balance. The third human's projection shifted again, revealing time-stamped instances where relay access had been restricted following political disputes between peripheral systems and the central core. The pattern was unmistakable. Balance appears selective. The chamber's acoustic stability fractured. Multiple delegations began speaking simultaneously across open channels. For the first time in recorded governance sessions, layered discourse overlapped beyond manageable translation bandwidth. Interference artifacts crackled through the sphere. Containment escalated. Emergency procedural override glyphs ignited along chamber walls. A motion to suspend evaluation under security pretext surfaced, requiring expedited vote from senior tiers only. The second human spoke into the rising noise. You will vote without those affected. The accusation landed with surgical precision. Peripheral species recognized the pattern instantly, decisions about them made without them. A crystalline delegation transmitted loudly. Motion contested. Under Universal Witness Statute, suspension affecting petitioning species requires full quorum acknowledgement. The presiding authority's energy signature spiked, then stabilized. Procedural review initiated. Time stretched under the weight of visible fracture. Across the galaxy, billions watched as internal council deliberation algorithms attempted to reconcile statutes long dormant. Legal cores parsed clauses that had not been activated in centuries. Rotational oversight references resurfaced repeatedly, flagged by automated integrity checks. The humans remained within intensifying security fields. Sweat formed along skin under rising atmospheric pressure. One adjusted footing again to redistribute weight. Muscular tremor registered but did not progress to collapse. Peripheral delegations began submitting formal requests for access to hyperlane source code repositories. The administrative system stalled, citing technical constraints. Those citations were broadcast in full. Technical constraint repeated too frequently. Suspicion hardened into pattern recognition. Within the chamber, a delegation composed of segmented arthropoid forms projected archival imagery, founding assembly footage from eras predating consolidation. In those recordings, central authority had been explicitly described as temporary steward during instability period. Temporary. The word echoed across translation matrices. The first human amplified it deliberately. Temporary stewardship implies expiration. The presiding authority attempted final containment narrative. Expiration was superseded by unanimous confidence. The arthropoid delegation replied immediately. No unanimous record exists. Data cores flickered. Administrative drones rerouted bandwidth towards central nodes, attempting to compress external transmission quality. Universal Witness Protocol forced redundancy. Peripheral systems began peer-to-peer rebroadcast, bypassing central relays. Containment failed. The chamber no longer functioned as singular vertical authority. It had become a network node among many. Security units hesitated at the platform perimeter. Orders to remove the humans physically would be visible to trillions. Visible coercion undercut stabilization rhetoric entirely. The presiding authority shifted tone. If fragmentation occurs, war follows. Are you prepared to assume responsibility? The second human answered evenly. Responsibility shared is not fragmentation. Across dozens of systems, minor species representatives initiated synchronized declarations of review, temporary suspension of tribute transfers pending doctrinal clarification. The statements were cautious, procedural, legally framed. Yet each represented a microfracture in centralized flow. Administrative metrics recalculated resource projections. Declines appeared, small but cascading. Within the chamber, energy pressure around the platform suddenly dropped. Security fields recalibrated downward, no longer compressive. The presiding authority recognized the risk. Visible force would accelerate secession. Invisible force had already failed. The third human deactivated the projection array slowly, deliberately, allowing the last image of relay throttling parameters to linger in shared airspace. We did not bring weapons. The first human continued. We brought questions. Peripheral delegations responded not with applause, but with silence of a different quality. Active, processing, autonomous. Central containment nodes attempted one final maneuver. Motion to adjourn and relocate deliberation to secure subchambers inaccessible to universal witness. The proposal required majority from senior tiers. Before voting commenced, a crystalline delegation transmitted across open channel. Motion to relocate constitutes admission of concealment. The statement reverberated outward instantly. Senior tiers hesitated. That hesitation spread like fracture lines across ice. Vote stalled. No relocation motion achieved threshold. Across the galaxy, minor species councils initiated independent alliances for shared doctrinal audit. Communication webs formed laterally, bypassing central oversight nodes. Data moved without permission. The chamber lights flickered as energy distribution algorithms adjusted for unprecedented transmission load. The presiding authority remained seated, luminous filaments dimmer than at session start. The aura of inevitability surrounding the throne thinned perceptibly. The humans did not speak again. They did not need to. Containment had not merely failed. It had inverted. What began as evaluation transformed into exposure. What was framed as petition shifted into participation. Structural manipulation, once invisible through ritual and optimization rhetoric, now stood illuminated across every projection surface in the chamber and across countless distant skies. Peripheral tribute flows continued to suspend in cautious increments. Relay access logs were copied and mirrored by independent research clusters. Foundational doctrines were downloaded from ceremonial archives into active debate forums for the first time in centuries. The council sphere, designed to amplify vertical authority, now amplified horizontal inquiry. The presiding authority signaled session continuation under review. Voice steady, posture rigid, control intact in appearance. Yet biometric monitors recorded micro-variations, elevated thermal flux, delayed response intervals, irregular filament pulses. The fracture had entered the core. Above the central platform, no one ordered the humans removed. Below the layered tiers, no one knelt. Across the galaxy, systems long accustomed to receiving instruction began, quietly, to issue their own. The doctrinal spiral had begun tightening inward, not toward the humans, but toward the throne itself. Fleet shadows shifted first. Beyond the council sphere, layered armadas that had remained ceremonially distant altered formation vectors by fractional degrees. Engines warmed without full ignition, thermal signatures rising across the void in patterns recognizable to every military intelligence array in the galaxy. Defensive posture could still be claimed. Preemptive intimidation could still be denied. But alignment angles revealed intent. Inside the chamber, the presiding authority did not announce the mobilization. That omission carried weight heavier than declaration. Senior military delegates embedded within upper tiers received encrypted directives through spinal interface conduits, prepare demonstration deployment, authorize escalation tier 1, await final command. Across peripheral systems, early warning networks detected the formation shift. Data relayed laterally before central nodes could intercept. Visual feeds of massed fleets hovering near transit nexuses spread across civilian networks in minutes. For many minor species, this was the first time they had seen the enforcement arm of governance without ceremonial framing. Within the chamber, tension condensed into a tangible pressure field. Atmospheric processors strained under synchronized adrenaline surges from thousands of biological forms. The humans remained at the platform's center, no longer isolated by security barriers, yet not invited to withdraw. A senior military representative from the ruling species descended from the upper tiers, armored exoskeleton reflecting chamber light in fractured patterns. The descent itself violated custom. Military command rarely entered deliberative space directly. Voice amplification rippled outward. Stability is threatened. Demonstration of order required. The phrasing was careful, sanitized, but beneath it lay a simple proposition. Fear must be restored. The second human turned slightly toward the descending figure. Demonstration to whom? Silence followed, heavy and deliberate. To all. Across multiple subordinate fleets, command officers reviewed escalation protocols. Authorization for demonstration required confirmation from the presiding authority and compliance from regional captains. Routine under past conditions. Now, hesitation registered in microseconds. The arthropoid delegation initiated an open query. Define demonstration parameters. The military representative projected a holographic model into the chamber's airspace. Peripheral system flagged for tribute suspension. Fleet would enter orbit, conduct high-energy atmospheric discharge over uninhabited region. Message delivered. No casualties required. The chamber absorbed the model in silence. The third human activated a projection overlay without permission. Historical footage appeared. Archival records of prior demonstrations labeled preventative. Each showed escalation beyond initial parameters. Infrastructure collapse. Civilian displacement. Long-term economic dependency. Preventative action frequently expands. The military representative's thermal signature spiked. Historical context incomplete. The first human stepped forward. Context is visible. Across the galaxy, the overlay broadcast simultaneously. Peripheral populations watched simulations of atmospheric discharge scaled against their own planetary maps. Fear traveled faster than fleet engines could. Within the ruling species command hierarchy, division sharpened. Some commanders transmitted immediate readiness affirmations. Others inserted delay codes into acknowledgement streams. Micro-hesitations measurable only in high-resolution tactical logs, but significant in cumulative effect. The presiding authority signaled through private channel, execute demonstration. Response delay exceeded expected threshold. Within the chamber, a crystalline delegation rose abruptly, emitting harmonic resonance that cut through layered murmurs. Founding doctrine states military force deployed only under unanimous existential threat classification. Data cores cross-checked automatically. Clause verified. The military representative countered. Existential threat includes destabilization of governance continuity. The second human answered calmly. Governance continuity is not identical to collective survival. The distinction detonated across analytical networks. Peripheral species began parsing definitions embedded in centuries-old statutes. Governance continuity had been redefined incrementally over eras to equate central authority with survival itself. The arthropoid delegation transmitted a counter-analysis. Redefinition not ratified by full quorum historically. The presiding authority's filaments flared brighter, then dimmed. Procedural evolution acknowledged through practice. Practice without ratification is precedent without consent. The chamber's acoustic stability shattered into overlapping translation waves. Security units at the perimeter tightened grip on energy weapons, yet did not advance. They awaited command confirmation that did not arrive cleanly. Outside the sphere, fleet captains received contradictory signals: escalate, hold, reassess. Within the ruling species' own command lattice, officers began transmitting secure side-channel inquiries. Does demonstration risk wider secession cascade? One regional commander delayed engine ignition sequence, citing calibration anomaly. Another rerouted patrol vector slightly off prescribed course, buying minutes. Minutes became strategic oxygen. Inside the chamber, the military representative advanced another step toward the humans. If fragmentation spreads, blood follows. Will you assume consequence? The first human did not retreat. Consequence exists already. It is merely visible now. Across peripheral systems, civilian populations initiated planetary defense mobilizations, not to attack, but to observe. Sensor arrays pointed outward. Broadcast networks synchronized. Visibility became shield. The presiding authority issued renewed command through direct neural link to Fleet Command Core. Execute demonstration immediately. Response returned fragmented. Several captains requested clarification under founding clause. Query cascaded upward. Clarification required public statement under universal witness mandate. The chamber fell into sharpened stillness. To proceed without addressing clause risked open violation broadcast to trillions. To address clause required acknowledgement that existential threat classification had not been formally invoked. The presiding authority chose silence. Silence stretched long enough to register as fracture. A young officer from the ruling species' mid-tier delegation rose unexpectedly. Scales along the neck ridge flickered with conflicting chromatic signals: fear, defiance, uncertainty. Request doctrinal clarification before military execution. The chamber gasped in layered frequencies. Public contradiction from within the ruling species had not occurred in recorded memory. The military representative turned slowly toward the officer. Stand down. The officer did not lower gaze. Founding oath binds command to doctrine. Across fleet command channels, dozens of officers replayed the exchange. Oath language resurfaced in archival memory banks long dormant. For centuries, loyalty had been directed toward authority figure. Now language of loyalty to doctrine re-entered active consciousness. The presiding authority addressed the chamber at last. Doctrine evolves. Authority interprets. The third human spoke quietly. Interpretation without consent is control. Peripheral delegations began transmitting synchronized statements. Until doctrinal review concludes, no force authorized against tribute suspending systems. The arthropoid delegation appended a formal motion. Temporary freeze on enforcement deployments pending review. Motion required majority acknowledgement. Votes initiated in real time across open channel. Numbers climbed. Within the ruling species' command lattice, hesitation crystallized into refusal. One fleet withdrew a fractional distance from demonstration vector. Another powered down atmospheric discharge arrays pending clarity. The military representative's thermal output spiked again, armor plates tightening. Failure to demonstrate invites collapse. The second human replied without raising volume. Force may delay collapse. It cannot repair legitimacy. Across billions of distant observers, the phrase replicated in commentary feeds. cannot repair legitimacy. The presiding authority recognized the battlefield had shifted from orbit to perception. A demonstration now would not project strength, it would confirm coercion. Engine ignition sequences across multiple fleets were suspended simultaneously. The chamber registered the shift as subtle dimming of external sensor feeds. Peripheral systems detected de-escalation signatures before formal announcement. Relief waves passed through distant populations. Inside the sphere, the ruling species delegation fractured visibly. Some members signaled outrage, filaments flaring. Others dimmed, withdrawing into contemplative stillness. The young officer who had spoken remained upright. The presiding authority regarded the chamber with a stillness no longer invulnerable. Military execution postponed pending doctrinal review. The statement cost more than any fleet maneuver. Across the galaxy, lateral communication webs intensified. Species that had never coordinated began drafting mutual defense pacts centered not on central authority, but on shared review principles. The humans stood amid the unfolding rupture, not triumphant, not celebrating. They had not fired a shot, yet fleets had halted. Security units along the chamber perimeter eased stance incrementally. Energy weapons dimmed. The psychological threshold had shifted. Orders were no longer reflexively obeyed. They were evaluated. The military representative withdrew step by measured step, armor reflecting fractured light. The presiding authority remained seated but no longer radiated inevitability. Biometric readings across the chamber registered collective cognitive turbulence, belief systems recalibrating under live observation. The first human looked upward at the layered tiers. You asked what we are. No one interrupted. We are what happens when doctrine is examined. Silence followed, not imposed, but chosen. Outside the sphere, fleets settled into holding patterns rather than intimidation arcs. In peripheral systems, planetary assemblies convened emergency councils to discuss future alignment, remain, reform, or realign entirely. Within the ruling species' own command structure, loyalty vectors split along doctrinal lines. Officers began quietly archiving orders for potential future accountability review. The fracture had penetrated the armed spine of authority. Force had not been used, yet it had been neutralized by doubt. As the session continued under strained procedural order, one reality crystallized across trillions of minds. The throne could command engines. It could not command belief. And once belief wavered within those holding weapons, hierarchy itself began to tilt. Voting sigils ignited without ceremony. No recess, no transition. The presiding authority triggered emergency disciplinary statute directly from the throne. Glyphs flooded the chamber walls in rigid geometric bands, ancient language resurfacing from legal strata long untouched. Under revised continuity doctrine, destabilizing species could be suspended from deliberation, isolated, and subjected to structural correction. Structural correction required only senior-tier majority. The chamber understood what that meant. The humans did not step back as disciplinary parameters projected around them in a tightening lattice of light. The energy field did not yet compress, but its intention was unmistakable. Across the galaxy, universal witness feeds magnified every symbol, every clause. The presiding authority spoke with calibrated restraint. In light of destabilizing conduct and systemic agitation, motion initiated to suspend human participation pending doctrinal stabilization. Suspension, a word carefully selected to avoid annihilation rhetoric. Senior tier votes began registering. Affirmative, affirmative, affirmative. Glyph clusters shifted color with each tally. Peripheral delegations accessed procedural restrictions. Suspension would strip speaking rights, revoke broadcast parity, and reclassify humanity as conditional entity under review. The spiral would tighten again, silently this time. Before the affirmative count reached threshold, the third human activated a projection that did not originate from chamber systems. It originated from outside. Across every universal feed, a secondary transmission overlaid the voting sigils. It bore no central insignia, no crest, no authority marker. A simple header, Open Accord Initiative. The presiding authority's filaments flared in immediate response. Unauthorized transmission. Yet Universal Witness Protocol prevented suppression without chamber-wide acknowledgement. The projection expanded, not a speech. A framework. Decentralized Alliance Charter, formatted in modular segments. Mutual Recognition Clause. Voluntary Transit Reciprocity. Shared Research Commons. Rotational Mediation Councils selected by participating members rather than inherited hierarchy. No throne. No permanent seat. No tribute language. The second human spoke into the swelling silence. We were invited to petition for inclusion. We declined. The word decline did not echo. It settled. We proposed participation elsewhere. The charter scrolled line by line. It did not demand abandonment of existing structures. It offered parallel alignment. Any species may sign. No exclusivity. No penalties for withdrawal. Security units tightened formation instinctively around the platform. Yet they did not advance. Millions were watching. Billions. Trillions. Across peripheral systems, council chambers flickered with sudden light as delegates convened emergency sessions. Senior tier affirmative votes continued climbing. Affirmative. Affirmative. The presiding authority accelerated tally speed, attempting to reach threshold before external momentum stabilized. Then the first external signal arrived. A crystalline delegation activated chamber microlattice. We suspend tribute flows effective immediately and enter review of open accord initiative. Gasps rippled through layered tiers. That declaration carried financial weight. Tribute was not symbolic. It fueled fleets, infrastructure, dominance. Senior tier votes faltered for a fraction of a second. Affirmative. Affirmative. A second signal. An aquatic coalition announced conditional transit cooperation with signatories of the Open Accord pending doctrinal audit. The arthropoid delegation followed. We invoke provisional autonomy clause dormant since consolidation era and open independent transit negotiations. Across the galaxy, lateral communication webs ignited into dense constellations. Species long isolated by hyperlane throttling began transmitting directly through alternative channels using workarounds derived from exposed relay architecture. Senior tier affirmative count neared suspension threshold. The presiding authority signaled urgency through neural command lattice. Lock vote. Accelerate confirmation. Before the final count sealed, a development outside the chamber shifted the axis. Fleet status feeds flickered. Multiple peripheral fleets altered allegiance markers. Not mutiny. Not attack. Reclassification. Transit beacons switched from central authorization codes to autonomous identifiers referencing Open Accord Provisional Registry. Inside the chamber, the military representative's armor dimmed as tactical feeds streamed across internal optics. Peripheral fleets were not attacking. They were opting out. The second human's voice remained steady. We are not dismantling your structure. We are removing our consent. The word consent detonated more violently than suspension had. Peripheral delegations replayed the term in internal languages. Consent implied voluntary alignment. It implied that hierarchy functioned because participants allowed it. Senior tier affirmative votes stalled one short of threshold. The presiding authority attempted override. Override denied. The denial did not come from peripheral species. It came from within senior command lattice. An internal integrity safeguard triggered automatically when quorum integrity dropped below stability margin. With tribute suspensions and fleet reclassifications underway, quorum assumptions no longer met baseline parameters. The vote froze mid-sequence. Silence engulfed the chamber. Across distant systems, signature confirmations began populating the Open Accord Registry. Crystalline Coalition, provisional signatory. Aquatic Coalition, provisional signatory. Arthropoid Delegation, provisional signatory. Minor Gas Giant Dwelling Consortium, exploratory signatory. One by one, not in overwhelming wave, but in steady, irreversible increments. The presiding authority addressed the chamber, voice sharpened. Fragmentation invites war between signatories and loyalists. The third human responded. War requires enforcement. Your fleets hesitate. Outside the sphere, telemetry confirmed it. Central Command attempted to recall peripheral fleets to demonstration vectors. Responses returned in layered delays. Clarify doctrinal basis. Confirm existential classification. Awaiting review. Within the ruling species' own military ranks, loyalty vectors had not shattered, but they had slowed. Slowing was enough. The first human stepped forward slightly, light glinting off skin damp with controlled strain. You built stability on inevitability. Inevitability has expired. Peripheral species began activating localized defense networks not against central fleets, but as mutual transparency measures, joint sensor grids shared among open accord signatories. Visibility replaced fear as stabilizing mechanism. Inside the chamber, the presiding authority attempted one final maneuver. Emergency statute permitting isolation of open accord signatories from hyperlane access. The third human lifted gaze. Your relay throttling architecture is no longer exclusive. Across dozens of systems, newly modified transit arrays activated experimental routes derived from exposed infrastructure models. Not flawless, not stable, but functional enough. Ships jumped without central authorization. The chamber trembled not physically, but perceptually as reports streamed inward. Independent transit achieved. Independent transit achieved. Independent transit achieved. Each confirmation chipped at central leverage. Senior-tier delegates who had voted affirmative minutes earlier recalibrated positions. Abstentions appeared. A rare negative vote surfaced from within upper tiers. The presiding authority's filaments dimmed in micro-flickers. This path cannot be reversed. The second human answered quietly. Neither can yours. Open accord registry count climbed past symbolic threshold. Enough species representing enough territory and resource flow to render suspension of humanity strategically irrelevant. Even if suspended, humanity would not be isolated. Isolation had been the weapon. Now it dissolved. Within the ruling species' own delegation, visible division widened. Some signaled loyalty to throne. Others signaled doctrinal review. A few transmitted silent support signals to open accord registry under encrypted channels that universal witness soon decrypted. The chamber's acoustic environment shifted. What had been layered tension became diffuse realization. Hierarchy did not collapse in explosion. It drained. The presiding authority remained seated, posture rigid, eyes fixed downward toward the humans. You have fractured the union. The first human did not deny it. The union fractured when participation ceased to be voluntary. Outside the sphere, economic flows rerouted. Tribute transfers paused permanently from multiple systems. Research data once centralized began uploading into shared commons networks seeded by open accord nodes. Central administrative cores recalculated stability projections. Negative trajectory sustained. Recovery unlikely without coercive intervention. Coercive intervention probability decreasing as fleet compliance variance increases. Within the chamber, one of the oldest senior-tier delegates, silent through centuries of sessions, rose slowly. Bioluminescent patterns across its surface flickered in contemplative cadence. Perhaps continuity requires redesign. The statement was not endorsement. It was acknowledgement. The presiding authority's gaze shifted slightly, no longer solely upon the humans, but across the tiers that had once reflected unquestioned alignment. Open accord signatory count surpassed half of peripheral representation. Not majority of all species, but enough. Enough to form alternative quorum. The suspension vote glyphs faded from chamber walls, unresolved, archived in procedural limbo. The humans did not cheer. They did not raise arms. They stood amid structural inversion unfolding in real time. Across trillions of observers, a realization crystallized. Authority was not removed by force. It was bypassed. The presiding authority spoke once more, voice quieter than at session start. If the union dissolves, chaos follows. The third human responded. If participation is chosen, structure evolves. Open accord registry stabilized at a number impossible to ignore. Secession had not been declared. Alignment had shifted. The chamber no longer represented singular axis of governance. It had become one node among emerging many. The spiral that began with refusal to kneel now tightened around the throne itself. And for the first time in millennia, the possibility of a council without permanent ruler entered collective imagination. The emergency vote had not succeeded. It had accelerated inversion. Darkness swallowed the chamber without warning. Not total absence of light, controlled dimming. The presiding authority initiated ancient supremacy protocol reserved for existential consolidation eras. Energy conduits beneath the throne flared alive, drawing power from the station's core lattice. Atmospheric pressure shifted as gravitational vectors recalibrated toward the central axis. The throne began to rise. Layered tiers rotated subtly inward, architectural geometry reasserting vertical dominance. The chamber itself attempted to remember its original design: one center, one apex, all others oriented below. Across the galaxy, universal witness feeds trembled as energy flux spiked. Analysts recognized the pattern. Supremacy protocol had been used only in epochs of near collapse, symbolic realignment through overwhelming spectacle. The humans felt gravity thicken around them, pressing down with deliberate insistence. Peripheral delegates struggled to maintain posture as vector forces nudged every body toward the ascending throne. The presiding authority's voice expanded across the chamber, no longer calm but resonant, amplified through station-wide harmonic grids. Continuity is not optional. The throne reached its apex, luminous filaments blazing with near-blinding intensity. The entire sphere oriented toward that point. Architecture itself demanded submission. Across peripheral systems, fleets loyal to central authority reignited engines. Not to attack, to display alignment. Massive hulls rotated in synchronized arcs visible from planetary surfaces. Symbol over force. The first human adjusted stance against increased gravity, muscles trembling yet holding. The second inhaled slowly, stabilizing breath under pressure. The third raised a hand toward the projection lattice, fingers shaking under load. The presiding authority continued. Without singular command, you invite fragmentation. Without hierarchy, you invite annihilation. Gravitational pressure intensified another increment. Several peripheral delegates lowered themselves involuntarily. The chamber appeared to reassemble around inevitability. Then the projection ignited again. Not open accord charter this time. Live signal aggregation. Across the sphere's inner shell, thousands of smaller feeds opened simultaneously. Not pre-selected. Not curated. Every open accord signatory system transmitting in unison. Planetary assemblies. Civil councils. Fleet bridges. Research chambers. Civilian habitats orbiting distant suns. Faces. Forms. Billions. The third human forced the projection wider despite gravity distortion rippling through the display. Mandate requires participants. The second human spoke through strain. You claim continuity. Across the aggregated feeds, synchronized statements began broadcasting. Not scripted. Not identical. Variations in language, tone, cultural form. Yet all converging on one principle. Authority derives from consent. The gravitational pressure faltered slightly, as station power rerouted to manage projection overload. The presiding authority attempted to isolate the feeds. Override commands cascaded through control lattice. Denied. Peripheral technicians embedded within station subsystems, long ignored, long underestimated, had already rerouted redundancy circuits. Supremacy protocol did not account for internal diffusion of access. The throne's luminosity flickered. Across fleet command channels, captains witnessed civilian assemblies asserting open accord alignment publicly. To enforce supremacy now required firing upon systems broadcasting under universal witness. The optics alone would shatter residual loyalty. The presiding authority intensified harmonic output. The chamber vibrated at bone-shaking frequency designed to disrupt neural stability across species. Several delegates convulsed, sensory organs overwhelmed. The first human dropped to one knee under gravitational spike. Muscle fibers strained, yet the knee did not touch floor fully. The second human steadied the first with visible effort. The third maintained projection, blood vessels and eyes bursting under pressure. Across aggregated feeds, species began activating synchronized resonance patterns, counterharmonics calibrated by collaborative research shared through open accord commons. The frequencies collided midair, destabilizing supremacy waveform. The chamber trembled physically now, not metaphorically. Structural supports groaned as competing harmonic fields interfered. The presiding authority's voice sharpened. Cease or face eradication. Across thousands of live feeds, the response came not as roar, but as steady affirmation. We withdraw consent. The phrase replicated across languages in cascading overlay. Gravity recalibrated again, attempting to force kneeling. The first human's knee finally struck the platform surface under unbearable load. For a fraction of a second, the chamber exhaled in collective recognition of submission. Then the human pushed upward. Not smoothly, not effortlessly, with visible strain, shaking, breath tearing through compressed lungs. The knee lifted. The body rose. The platform cracked under redistributed force as muscular contraction defied vector alignment. Across peripheral feeds, billions watched the motion. Across fleet bridges, commanders saw it too. The symbolism cut deeper than any weapon strike. The second human spoke through gritted breath. Authority that must crush to stand cannot stand long. The harmonic counterfields intensified as more signatories synchronized resonance patterns. Supremacy waveform destabilized further. The throne's luminous filaments flickered in erratic pulses. Within the ruling species' own delegation, a senior commander stood. We pledge to doctrine, not to fear. The statement carried through chamber without amplification. Other ruling species delegates rose slowly, not in rebellion, but in recognition. The presiding authority attempted final override. Control lattice integrity dropped below stabilization threshold. Power rerouted from supremacy protocol to structural containment to prevent catastrophic chamber failure. Gravitational pressure normalized abruptly. Delegates collapsed to stable posture, gasping. The throne ceased ascending. It remained elevated, but no longer unreachable. Across aggregated feeds, species initiated formal mandate sequence. Not vote of expulsion, not declaration of war, mandate of restructuring. Rotational Stewardship Council proposed under open accord framework with optional integration pathway for existing union structures. No permanent throne, term-limited coordination nodes, transparent transit architecture, shared oversight across military deployments. The presiding authority remained seated, luminosity dimming to baseline. You dismantle centuries. The third human answered softly, projection steady now. We evolve them. Across fleet command channels, captains began transmitting acknowledgement of mandate reception. Several switched allegiance markers from central insignia to provisional rotational council emblem, not as revolt, as compliance with new majority consent. The chamber's architecture adjusted lighting gradually, no longer orienting solely toward the throne, but distributing illumination across tiers equally. A subtle shift, but unmistakable. One by one, senior tier delegates initiated support signals for mandate review. Not unanimous. Not immediate, but sufficient. Sufficient to cross irreversible threshold. The presiding authority surveyed the chamber, once unified, now plural. Filaments dimmed further. What are you? The question carried no contempt now. The first human, chest rising and falling heavily, answered without theatrics. We are participants. Silence followed. Then the oldest surviving delegate within the chamber, ancient beyond recorded consolidation, rose and transmitted a formal procedural declaration. Under universal witness and majority consent, permanent supremacy structure dissolved. Interim rotational council convened. The words etched themselves into active governance logs across the galaxy instantly. Permanent supremacy structure dissolved. No explosion. No collapse of walls. Just language altering architecture more thoroughly than force ever had. The throne did not shatter. It remained, unoccupied as supremacy symbol. The presiding authority descended from it slowly, without spectacle, stepping onto the same platform level as the humans and other delegates. No kneeling, no bowing, only equal gravity. Across aggregated feeds, planetary assemblies witnessed the moment. Fleet formations shifted from intimidation arcs to dispersed patrol vectors. Tribute channels formally decommissioned. Hyperlane source code uploaded into shared commons repositories. The chamber's central platform expanded outward mechanically, merging with surrounding tiers into a flattened deliberation field. Hierarchy inverted not by destruction, but by redistribution. The presiding authority spoke one final time, voice stripped of harmonic amplification. Then let the mandate stand. Across trillions of observers, the shift crystallized. No singular ruler. No central inevitability. Only consent recalibrated continuously. The humans stood among countless forms in a chamber no longer structured for domination. The spiral had completed its turn. Hierarchy had not collapsed into chaos. It had inverted into choice. And once choice became visible to all, it could not be unseen.